afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Fridays with Keenan's Cutting Edge. My name is Jenna and I will be your host as we explore the dynamic world of Don Keenan's trial philosophy, The Cutting Edge. Those of you joining us live this afternoon have the opportunity to ask questions and interact with our speaker. If you have a question, please type it into the comments section below and we'll be sure to address it. And I say this every week, but please feel free to type out whatever questions you have. It's really great to know we have the audience listening and participating. So don't be shy, ask questions. Episodes are released each week following the live broadcast. So be sure to hit that subscribe button and click the alerts icon so you don't miss an episode. Today, we have Allan Galbraith with us out of Palm Desert, California. Now, he lives in Palm Desert, California, but he's with the Keenan Law Firm and has been since 2002. And he's going to be talking to us about behavioral health issues. Now, I don't know that I know a lawyer who hasn't dealt with some kind of health issue directly caused by the practice of law. Whether it be physical or mental or emotional, what we do for a living is brutal. And Mr. Galbraith is going to talk to us today about the fact that there is hope for you after struggling with whether it be addiction or a mental health struggle or a physical health struggle. Because realistically, on top of the brutality of what we do for a living, we are consistently ranked as one of the most hated professions, right down there with used car salesmen and Congress. Wow, that hurts. Lawyers are people too, folks. As always, we're going to put Allan's contact information in the description below so you can contact him directly with any questions you have about this topic or anything Edge. Allan, let's get right into it. Talk to us about this incredibly important issue and why it's a topic you wanted to share with our audience.
Well, thank you, Jenna, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to your audience. I'm a rookie doing a podcast, so bear with me. I'm also fortunately just getting over COVID, so I got a little bit of COVID brain still going on. You know, but I probably know some people, some of you I don't. But like Jenna said, I've been with the Keenan Law Firm since 2002. I've been practicing law since 1979, so I guess I got a little bit of wear on my tire treads here. I'm barred in both Georgia and California, and I've always worked. I started out working for the first 19 years that I practiced as a solo. I then worked in a small plaintiff's firm before I got to the Keenan Law Firm. You know, one of the things we ask jurors is, what's your passion? And my passion has been behavioral health, particularly people who struggle with substance use disorders. I got a master's degree. I started a master's degree program in 2007 that I finished in 2010 in substance abuse counseling. I've been on the State Bar of Georgia's Lawyer Assistance Committee since 2008, where we try to help people who are having emotional or behavioral health issues, among other things. We do more than that, but that's a lot of what we do. And it's personal to me, because one of the things that I am also is a recovering alcoholic. I got sober on April the 24th, 1998. I went to a mental health hospital that day to get treatment. To tell you a little bit about how things were going in my life at that point, April the 24th, 1998 happened to be 4 days before my 43rd birthday. So things were kind of it kind of hit the skids, I guess you could say. At the time that I went to treatment, I had probably been drinking for 25 years. And that was on a daily basis. I had been a round-the-clock drinker for probably 2 to 3 years. When I was a child, and this kind of goes back to how I get to where I am. I know I felt very insecure. I felt like I wasn't a part of, I didn't fit in. And I felt like other people knew that about me. It was almost like I was walking around with a big red stamp that read abnormal across the front of my forehead. There are some positive benefits to feeling like that. I was driven to succeed and excel, and I did. I graduated from high school and I was 17 years old at that point, and I was reasonably good at athletics. At that point, I had never taken a drink or a drug. And I literally, and I mean this literally, I discovered alcohol in the summer after I graduated from college. And I use the word discovered intentionally. And you'll find a lot of people who are in recovery have that in their story. I went to a party, I had 3 to 4 drinks, and it was like I found something that had been missing in my life. I suddenly felt I belonged, I was a part of, I didn't feel that abnormal, isolated, alienated feeling anymore. And I chased that feeling for the next 25 years. I mean, within a year of that party, I was a daily drinker. I had drugs in my story as well, but alcohol in the end was what brought me down. You know, drugs, particularly weed, was illegal. Back then, the State Bar of Georgia tended to frown on people who got arrested for possession of narcotics. Not so much at the time alcohol, but so, you know, I went through that. One of the things that when I got sober, that I looked at, and I don't know whether everybody does this or not, but you know, you have the feeling like, where did I cross this line? Where was the magic line that I suddenly crossed? And for me, I think looking back at it, I crossed 3 lines. The first line that I crossed was the very first time that I took that drink, because it changed the way that I interacted with the world. There is an AA speaker by the name of Clancy Emerson who's really entertaining. He's got a lot. He is also the developer of Elsie the Board and Cow. If you've got some age on you, and you know, he did a lot of different things. He was a radio guy out here in Los Angeles. But Clancy says the difference between an alcoholic and a non-alcoholic is that for an alcoholic, alcohol does something for them rather than doing something to them. And I believe that's true with me. You know, I was, well, I guess I should say the second line I crossed was at some point in time, I started drinking to suppress negative emotion and negative events rather than drinking for that kind of positive enhancement, that feeling of belonging and fitting in. The third line that I crossed was when I no longer had any choice in the matter of whether I was going to drink or not. I was an at-home daily drinker for the most part. I wasn't a bar hopper. I, in the end, was drinking over a quart of whiskey and a 6-pack of beer each and every day. You know, I neglected personal responsibilities. It was not unusual in my house for the water, the electricity, the gas to get turned off because I didn't get around to paying bills. My house went into foreclosure a couple of times. Not necessarily because I didn't have the money to pay them. I just didn't I was not good about writing checks. Needless to say, I also neglected professional responsibilities. I didn't go to work sometimes. There was nobody there to fire me. I was working for myself, you know. Can't really fire yourself. You know, lying becomes a habitual thing because you have to cover up what you're doing. You have to lie. You're not holding up your end of the deal, either with your clients, with your opposing counsel, with whatever's going on. And you have to lie to cover that up. Sometimes you get caught. It's ugly. Sometimes I would get in a real jam and it was like, you say the foxhole prayer, God, if you get me out of this one, I promise never to do it again. But I do. When you're drinking that much, you get strange issues or strange ideas about things. I am obviously concerned with appearances, and I start to worry that the garbage man is got an understanding of how much I'm drinking. So rather than throw the empties in the garbage, I bag them up and take them to a strip center where I can throw them in a dumpster. I go to different liquor stores rather than go to the same one all the time. I have a circle that I run around. I have physical health issues. My stomach is so torn up by alcohol that I have difficulty eating, maintaining a proper diet. I am terrified of the phone because the telephone has mostly angry people on the other end of it who want something from me that I cannot give them. Or they want money because I haven't paid them. I hide bottles. The worst day of my life or the worst night of my life is Sunday evening every week, because during the weekend I have been able to hide. And Monday morning I am expected to get up and do it all over again. And it is just terrifying. I worked in downtown. Interestingly, I worked in downtown Atlanta at that point, less than a block away from where Keaton Law Firm offices are. And there were a lot of homeless people, street people on the streets of downtown Atlanta, even back then. And I would go to work in the morning and I would see these people on the street and I would think, my life would be better if I could trade places with them. I just wouldn't have so many problems. I get to the last day that I drink and I do one of these deals of, I call my office. I shared space with 4 other people and I had that arrangement with them. And we were pretty remarkable. We stayed together for 19 years. But by the time I get to the end, they are terrified of me. I mean, I am a walking time bomb. And we had shared letterhead, shared malpractice policy, and they have taken me off of both. So I get to the last day that I drink, which is April the 23rd, 1998. And I get up in the morning and I am around the clock drinker at this point. I mean, I have to have a drink the first thing when I get up in the morning just to stop the shakings, just not go into withdrawal. I call my office and I say, I'm working from home today, and everybody there knows what that means. And I start drinking. About 10 o'clock in the morning, I fall down a flight of stairs in my house. And I kind of shake it off. I keep drinking. And about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the same thing happens. And the second time I get a little bit hurt. I mean, I'm kind of bruised up and scraped up, and I walk into the bathroom downstairs and I look at myself in the mirror and I think, how could this happen to you? How did you get to this point? I mean, I literally could not have felt any worse about myself at that point. And, instead of being in trouble with other people, because I was already in trouble with other people, then I was in trouble with me. And for me, that's bottom. That's it. And I did something that was totally alien to me. I picked up the phone. I called one of the guys I work with and I said, you know, you're right. I've got a problem with alcohol and I need some help. They kicked in, they called the Georgia LAP. They got some advice. They showed up at my house that night and ran an intervention on me in between my wife and my two kids and these three guys that I work with. And they're saying, you got to go to treatment, you got to go to treatment, you got to go now, got to go now. And of course, I've continued to drink, and that little crack of willingness is closed right back up. But it is 6 against 1, and it is not a fair fight. And I finally say, okay, I'll go in the morning. And that satisfies them. They leave. I get up the next morning and I don't want to go to treatment. I don't have any idea what going to treatment means, but I know I don't want to go. But I cannot think of a graceful way to get out of this. And so my wife has arranged this, and I get into the car. I have my last drink right out of the bottle as I'm getting into this car to go to treatment at 7:30 that morning. I don't know what I thought. I had no idea of what I was doing. I didn't even have a toothpaste, or a toothbrush, Going to treatment now, going to be back by 5 o'clock, cured of alcoholism. I don't know what I'm doing. And she drops me off. She leaves. Long story, I don't get admitted to that treatment center because of insurance issues. They send me in an ambulance across town to a different treatment center because they couldn't figure out any way to transport me. When I finally get there, it's about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I am in acute withdrawal. I am shaking so badly. I smoked back then. I cannot light a cigarette. I am shaking so badly. One of the things that happens when you check into treatment is that you get breath tested. I haven't had anything to drink in 6.5 hours, and I blow a 0.18. And for reasons that are too long to get into right now, I get sent to another hospital. I said, we don't think you're medically stable. They call another ambulance, send me off to another hospital, look at me, and they said, no, he's okay. He's just a drunk, and they send me back. And that's my start into recovery. That's it. That's where I started from. And the rest, as they say, is kind of history. So we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. And I hope that if this echoes with anybody in the audience, that, they can identify with what's going on and maybe recognize in themselves some of these behaviors and find themselves where you did. I was so happy to hear that you had supportive partners that you practiced with, at least in the same building, people who cared enough to show up at your door and say, dude, this is, we saw a glimmer of hope when you had a self-realization. We are here to help you. One of my questions was in your family, I wasn't sure if you had a family at this time or not. It sounds like you did. That must have been difficult for them. Yeah, tell us a little more about that. And why should we care about this? Why, as lawyers, do we need to care about this issue?
So, family, I'm very fortunate. I am still married to the same wonderful woman that I have been married to since 1984. I am not quite sure why she stuck with me, but she did. I can tell you that I was very close to being invited to relocate to the Motel 6.
I can only imagine.
I think it's important for, to move kind of to the professional area here. It's important for us to care about this because it has a direct, it likely will have at some point in time, a direct economic impact on your own practice, if not yourself. The statistics, and I actually looked at did an update to prepare for this at some statistics, and Joe Tunstall, who did a talk that kind of overlaps a little bit what I have to say, also referenced some of this. And if you guys haven't listened to Joe's talk, I heartily recommend taking a listen to it, or even going back and listening to it, because he has some wonderful things to say, and I have some things that kind of overlap what he has to say. But alcohol use is, I don't want to use the word epidemic, but it is terrible in our profession. I mean, I just, the statistics that we get are kind of hard, but because they're self-report, and there are people responding to surveys, and the questions are not always the same. But what I've pulled out of this is there were some studies by a guy by the name of Andrew Benjamin out of the University of Washington, and he's an interesting guy. He's a JD and also a Psych D. And I think he teaches jointly at the University of Washington Law School and Medical School. And he ran some studies in the 80s and 90s that tended to indicate that about 18% of lawyers had what might be clinically diagnosed as an alcohol use disorder. And to put that in perspective, right now, probably 6% of the general population.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. So we're 3 times.
Well, it gets worse, Jenna.
Oh no.
There is a guy, the Hazelton, Betty Ford, and the ABA ran another survey of about 13,000 lawyers nationwide in 2016 that indicated that figure was 36.4% of lawyers had what might be indicative of an alcohol use or dependence disorder.
Wow.
In 2021, it was 29.8%.
Oh, wait.
It went down a little bit, but it's still, that's 1 in 3 people.
Yeah, no, that's crazy. I'm curious because it went down during COVID when most people's drinking was going up. We were sobering up over here.
Well, yeah, it is. And they tried to adjust in that 2021. And the guy who did both of those 2016 to 2021 studies, the same guy, a guy by the name of Patrick Krill, who also used to be a lawyer and went to treatment at Hazelton in Minnesota, and then ended up kind of following the same path that I did. He got a master's degree in substance abuse counseling, actually became a therapist. I never became a therapist. I'm not licensed as a therapist. But he went to work at Hazelton, and now he's doing a consulting business. But there's some other stats that we have here. We're really high on anxiety disorders. We are high on people who self-report severe to moderate depression. The COVID stat that really struck me in 2021 was almost 58% of these lawyers who were surveyed are reporting they are under severe or moderate stress. And that's a problem, So
do you think there's anything, because you shared with us a little bit about your childhood and the feeling of fitting in, and it just popped into my brain that as lawyers, most of our social events revolve around alcohol, and that's not atypical for a profession, but is there something to the fact that some of us might feel that way and we feel more emboldened or more social when we drink a lot, and then during COVID, we weren't quite so social? Is there anything to that?
I think that we as a profession need to be cognizant of the fact that in my time in practice, I have seen alcohol be less prevalent in social functions. I mean, it used to be, when I first started practicing, there were open bars everywhere, like after CLEs. And I think that it's
still that way, but maybe I don't really have context, so I'll defer to you on that.
Well, I don't do many outside CLEs anymore either, but I think we have become more cognizant of the fact that this is problematic. I mean, the fact that the ABA is publicly looking at it, I think, is encouraging.
That's good, yeah.
And there is, in fact, I'll give a shout out to them. There is a task force report that the ABA did in 2017 on lawyer well-being that I think is important, that people, if you're interested in this, or even if you're not, in terms of making adjustments in your own office practices and policies and procedures of how you encourage people to get healthy, stay healthy on an emotional well-being basis, that is worth taking a look at, because it's really gone beyond just looking at, does somebody have a diagnosable condition, to encouraging, this is more than the absence of a condition. We're talking about people functionally performing well. And, that, and being happy, and happy people are productive people. Mm-hmm. Happy people tend to stay put. Happy people tend to make less mistakes, and so that's why I say it is in your economic interest, if nothing else, to take a look at this, and if you can make some improvements to the way that your office functions, do so.
Absolutely. One thing Young G and I shared with people early on, because we've been a partnership for 10 years now. Next year will be our 10-year anniversary. And we really peddled the work from home, virtual office type thing. And that is not something that works for everybody. So let me preface it with that. But for us, it really helped our mental health and emotional health to be flexible, to be able to spend time with our families, to do things like that. And I'm not saying that's the answer to everyone, but to your point, take a step back, think about how you're managing your law firm, how you're interacting with people in your firm. I mean, as plaintiff lawyers, most of us don't work at huge 100 lawyer firms. We are closer to the managing partner or the owner of the firm than many other types of lawyers. So take that opportunity to reassess and think, how can I restructure my practice so that I'm as effective, if not more, but really caring for myself?
Yeah, I think that is important. One of the other things that I was really surprised to see in this was the ABA talk about the level of toxicity that exists in the legal profession.
I know.
And we saw Don blogging on it just last week as well, or maybe it was the week before. I don't remember. Mm-hmm. But this kind of just tension and combativeness is a little bit inherent in what we do. But I think in the time that I have practiced, it has certainly gotten, or seems to me to have gotten, worse. And I would like to see us, as the plaintiffs' bar, potentially take a step back from that. I'm not advocating anybody be a doormat here. Right. Yeah, of course not. But, look at the language that we use. I mean, opposing counsel. And I think in my history with Don, and I want to give Don a lot of shout outs for a lot of positive things that I think he did, both in structuring his office when I first came in there, in terms of putting people where they had an opportunity to succeed, but the way that we also related and prosecuted our cases. I was in Atlanta for the first 10 years that I was with the firm, and I was the person who primarily was involved in writing the pleadings, handling the paper discovery, keeping paper flow going in our office, making sure we got what we needed to do to get out and take depositions, to be ready to do that. And I spent a lot of time, because it was just instilled in me that this is the way that we do things. I filed, I will ask you a question. In 10 years, how many discovery motions do you think I filed?
10 years. I don't know. 250.
One.
What? Oh, I thought we were going on the high end here. We were going on the low end.
One. But it was because of the way that we did things. We established, you're going to see these people. You're right. This is a tough business we are in. And most of us are going to see the same set of defense counsel over and over and over again, because most of the practices, before I got to the Keenan Law Firm and had a regional and then a national practice, it was a local practice. And so you see the same people. And so it behooves us to establish relationships, amicable relationships with those people where everything is just not a constant fight. I mean, we were able to establish, we had a relationship with one guy in Atlanta at one point, but we were close to being able to resolve the case in mediation. And we ended up it was a brachial plexus injury case to a young child. And we were able to resolve that case based on that relationship, with there being no more money that the hospital or the carrier was willing to kick into the case, but the hospital was willing to provide physical therapy services that the child needed and would have had to have paid for in any event. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you can't get to that kind of more creative resolution.
Yeah.
If you're doing this all the time.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So
absolutely. Yeah, we actually just had a recent case like that where we knew there was no insurance for the party that we had sued, and they were paying out of pocket for their defense counsel, and it was adding up, and it was this big prolonged litigation because of another party that was involved. And finally, we sat down and said, what is it that we're looking for from this particular defendant? We need to walk the walk if we're going to talk the talk, and if we're concerned about community safety, how can we bake community safety into this limited amount of funds that they're able to provide to us? And we started negotiating there. They jumped right in and were happy to do so. They made changes to their policies, and we were able to get, it wasn't the biggest financial settlement, but it certainly was the one that got the best social safety outcome that we were really looking for. And our client was happy as well. So, to the extent that, we weren't fighting anymore with them. In fact, they started helping us against the other party. And it was just like this positive experience. It can be done.
Yeah, and that's part of lawyer well-being.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I think that is encouraging that the ABA looks at is they look at things like, where are you at spiritually? Can you imagine that? The American Bar Association cares about you being spiritually healthy. So I think we're reaching a sea change in how we look at this and how we address it and how it's important. Unfortunately, I think there are a lot of people out there who are still hurting and who don't seek help. Yeah,
no, absolutely. So how do we get help then? How do we, your bar association seems very helpful. My bar association is my disciplinarian. I would never go to them for help,
Well, let me tell you, Jenna, I had the exact, when I was using, I had the exact same attitude. The last people that I was going to call for help was the State Bar of Georgia.
Yeah.
Those people were there. And I think our attitude as a bar has changed in Georgia over the years. I want to say back in the 90s, at least my perception as a solo practitioner was that the bar was for large firms, number one. It was dominated by those people. And the Office of General Counsel was there to say when somebody like me screwed up, to reach out their hand and say, thank you, I'll take that license now.
Yeah.
And once they took it, you weren't going to get it back. And that's a real barrier to people. Look, lawyers are concerned, I think, about one, appearance. There's a stigma associated with having a behavioral health problem. They're afraid, what are What is the client going to think? What are my partners, my associates, my staff? What are those people going to think? I'm supposed to be better than this. I'm supposed to be the person who's helping, not the person who needs help. And there are confidentiality concerns about it. I know that there was a perception in Georgia at one point that the Lawyers Assistance Committee acted as a conduit to the Office of General Counsel of the State Bar. It wasn't true. It was never true. But it came about because you would see the disciplinary opinions roll out of the Georgia Supreme Court, and if there was a behavioral health issue there, the opinion invariably ended if there was a suspension of the lawyer or a disbarment, that they could not get their license either activated or back until they were cleared by the LAC. And so there was this linkage in the mind of the lawyers in public that, we were linked to discipline. And we worked very hard to completely institutionally divorce ourselves. And, the Lawyers Assistance Committee is a standing committee in Georgia of the State Bar, which means we are found in the bar rules. And one of the things to do this, I found out, is changing the Georgia bar rules is like getting an act of Congress passed. I mean, it is not an easy task.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we established that I think current members of the committee have is we have established a peer program where you can go in and go to a website, search it. I'm looking for somebody who can help me with this. And we will pop up a set of lawyers who have volunteered and who have been screened and have some degree of training, who are available to say, I've been here, I've done that, I can help you. And it's self-selection.
Wow.
We also have a thing that we have really publicized called Use Your Six, where simply by virtue of the fact that you are a member of the State Bar of Georgia, you have 6 sessions per year with a licensed therapist. Simply, all you got to do is pick up the phone and call us.
Wow. Do you know of other bars that are doing this? Like, do you?
There are our bar in terms of the peer support is lots of other LAPs have peer support. We are the only people who allow people seeking services to self-select. And I'll say it's been difficult to get this off the ground. We have been pretty good about getting people to be volunteers. It has been not as successful as we would have hoped to get people seeking services.
And I mean, when you mentioned confidentiality, how do you go and expose yourself to that level, be that vulnerable to this, body of your peers, and then be assured that it's not going to be passed from mouth to mouth?
How does anybody coming to you know as a lawyer? I mean, we have the same confidentiality rules written into, or same confidentiality obligations written into our rules that are essentially the same as a psychotherapist patient privilege or a lawyer client privilege. I mean, it's institutional. And lawyers can when you say that, I think a lot of lawyers can understand that. When I first started with the LAP committee, we weren't good about keeping statistics at that point. And I'm not talking about the Allan Galbraith called the Lawyers Assistance Committee and wanted to speak with a therapist. But we do keep records of where calls come from, some demographic type stuff. Our utilization rate back then was something less than 1%.
Yeah, I can imagine. I think it's a really tough thing.
And this year we are going to approach 3%, which
That's really good.
Lawyers also tend to be insured, so it may be that people are getting help elsewhere rather than coming to an LAP. But I think most LAPs offer a range of services that are similar to what we do. We function a lot like an employee assistance program would at a major employer. We get thought of as dealing with things like depression, substance use, anxiety, but we'll deal with stress, we'll deal with aging parents, we'll deal with childcare problems, we'll deal with money management issues. We can operate as a resource for people who are just struggling on life's terms, If it's impacting your ability to practice effectively, if you call us, we can try to find you a resource that can help you. And no charge. If you go beyond your if you need a higher level of care, then you're outside of the parameters of what we can offer. But
do you help facilitate? Do you have recommendations or referrals or anybody to plug people into if they need help beyond those 6 visits?
Yes, we can try to get you into. We're not going to. Some of it's driven by insurance concerns, obviously.
Sure.
If you don't have if you're a lawyer without insurance, your options are kind of limited.
Sure.
In terms of needing behavioral help, but yeah, we will try to help you, get you placed, make a recommendation to get you placed if you need a higher level of care.
So anybody who's listening to this, and myself included, everybody check out what your lawyer assistance program does. I really struggle with this, not only the stigma or whatever of going to the bar association because there are other lawyers, but because the bar is my disciplinarian. It's like the parent, right? Do you want to go to your parents and tell them you're struggling with anxiety? I don't know. Maybe you have a good relationship with your parents and that's good. But some of us don't have that relationship with the authoritarian figure in your life, and can be a struggle. But if let's make that a goal, is that we at least check out what that program in our state looks like and has to offer for us, so that we, if we do need it, it's a resource that we can consider looking into.
Yeah, I think that's important. Thank you for that, Jenna. And one of the things that I would stress to you is we want to help you before you're situated. You don't have to go to where I did. Mm-hmm. This is kind of do as I say, not as I did.
Yeah.
We want to reach you before you get to crisis proportions. We want to, you can head this off at the pass. It doesn't, I'm a big believer that, particularly for addictive disorders, the bottom, we talk about hitting bottom. And the bottom is a state of mind. Nobody goes to treatment, I don't think, voluntarily. The events will push you there. It's not like, oh, things are going so well in my life, I think I'll go to the mental health hospital today.
Right.
But, if you do this long enough, you will see people who, for whatever reason, just can't seem to get it, and they go all the way down the tubes. This is ultimately a fatal disease if you do not see. There are 3 endings for this if you don't do something to change: jails, institutions, or death.
What if we suspect somebody we work with or somebody we know is struggling with something like this? I think many of us might think it's none of our business. We don't want to embarrass that person, or maybe we're wrong. But is there a place we can go to ask about indicators and what we should do?
You can again call your LAP. They can help you and give you some pointers on how to address it. Whether it's somebody in your family who is struggling with it, somebody in your office who is struggling with it. I am a believer that you put it on the table. It's the elephant in the room, right? And if you don't address it, the problem isn't going to go away. Sometimes there will be some things that if the person isn't willing to seek help, there are going to be things that you have to do to protect yourself from that person. I mean, just like the people that I work with took steps to protect themselves from me. I mean, they took me off the letterhead. They took me off the malpractice policy of its employee. You may want to consider whether you want to keep that person in your office if they're not willing to seek treatment. If it's a client, you may want to consider, I will tell you that having had some personal experience representing people who are in active addiction, you got to think about, do I want to devote my time and resources if this person isn't willing to get help to doing this? Because we as addicts tend to screw up at the most inopportune times, and I know with in our office in Atlanta, we've got rid of some people. Don tells a story, I don't know, and this was a guy who just happened to be toxic, not necessarily an addict, but he was just kind of a bully. And he abused staff, and Don fired him.
Yep. And
he begged it.
Yeah, and that's a big part of, again, full circle, taking care of yourself and making sure you're thinking about your own mental health and emotional health. Like, do you have a client who is abusing you? I mean, we've been there. I'm sure everybody listening has been there where you've had an abusive client and you're like, but I took this case on and I promised to do my best and zealously advocate for this person. If it doesn't work out, you have to look at your ethical rules and what your responsibilities are to that person, but it is okay to let them go. It is okay if they are abusing you or your staff or whatever it may be, or just friggin' tanking their own case. It's okay to make that decision to let them go within the bounds of your ethical responsibilities. Not the day before trial, not, where you're going to compromise their outcome. But that, they always say you make the most money from the cases you don't take. You make the second most money by firing somebody you took, even if you did spend money on them, and getting them out of your life.
I also think that if you've got a client with and I was telling Jenna this before we started here, one of our referring lawyers reached out, I guess about a month ago, and was dealing with a client who had an alcohol use problem. He was uninsured. He needed pain management services as well as a result of the injury that he had that was at issue in the case. And it's kind of like, I said, reached out to this man, and I said, from my perspective, you have to try to get him into treatment first. You have to deal with the alcohol use problem, because if you send him to one of these generalized pain management clinics who just throw opiates at the problem, it is like throwing gas on a forest fire, and it is not going to, the chances of, you have a really good chance potentially there of having a fatal result. I know before I got to the Keenan Law Firm, and it was when I was in early recovery, I had a client who had an opiate problem. And it was clear to me that this man was circling the tubes. And I struggled with breaking my anonymity here. Say, I could see what's happening with you. I know where you are. And I didn't do it because I felt like it was a boundary, a professional boundary that I shouldn't cross. And he ended up dying. I don't know if I had, whether I would have made a difference to him or not, but I always wonder, So, we see these problems in real life in our practices, as well as, having to struggle with them ourselves. And, the message that I give people is there's hope here. If I can do this, anyone can do this. I honestly believe that. I was pretty desperate. And, I went from being in a lockdown detox ward, 4 years later being at the Keenan Law Firm, and a year after that representing a client in front of the United States Senate in the Krylak hearings. And, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But it does, it does.
Yeah.
Um,
How did you get connected with the Keenan Law Firm?
I had a case back when I was a solo. It was a tractor trailer crash, and I originally looked at the case as a products liability case. And I got a guy by the name of Dick Goodman out of Detroit who was an inner circle guy. He was an auto products litigator, and I looked at this as a products case potentially, and he took the case. We ended up trying it together. I had addiction issues at that point, but I wasn't all the way down the tubes yet. It was in the early 90s, and we ended up settling the case for a substantial amount of money. And when I got done, I was finishing up with this small plaintiff's practice, and we were parting ways, on an amicable basis. And I kind of thought to myself, if I'm going to keep doing this, I really want to play at the top of the heap. And I knew that Dick and Don were friends. And so I asked Dick if he would write me a recommendation to the Keenan Law Firm, because they were both in the inner circle together. And I didn't hear anything for like 4 months. And then suddenly I got a call from somebody at the firm, and they asked me to come down and interview, and there it was.
So were you with the Keenan Law Firm during the time when you were struggling? No, you weren't, right? Struggling.
No, I was 4 years. I was 4 years sober when not quite 4 years sober. And I will tell you, I people may wonder about this. I did not lead with my chin saying I'm in recovery, but I was up in Don's office, and they had offered me the job at this point. And I said, and I gave them the opportunity to back out. I said, there's something that you need to know about me. And this is it. Because I didn't know, at that point, 4 years out, there's still potentially time bombs that might go off from my past, right?
Yeah.
So, and one of the things for me personally is I didn't want the burden of carrying those secrets. And so I just said, here it is. Here are the warts. And I think that to Don's credit, I think he respected me for making that disclosure, for being honest and upfront about it.
Yep. I imagine that he would, knowing him, doesn't want secrets, doesn't want lies. He wants it straight up. So as somebody where you are today, what do you do to maintain your health, your sobriety, continue getting better? What habits do you have to help yourself?
So I started out, I went to residential treatment. Back then, everybody kind of got 30 days. I had Cigna. I did not have good health insurance. I was declared cured after 21. But I went to a place called Ridgeview, which at the time was a nonprofit, and it had a professionals program. And I was a part of, doctors, nurses, lawyers, dentists, airline pilots, some type of C-suite executives, but mostly doctors, nurses, and lawyers. And so I went through a fairly intensive aftercare. I had an aftercare commitment of 2 years where I went to group therapy 3 times a week. I was randomly drug tested once a month during that time. I ended up because I felt like it helped me. I ended up doing that for 4 years, and I only stopped doing that, going to group therapy. I love group therapy. I think it's a wonderful thing. I did that for 4 years. I only stopped when I couldn't swing the schedule when I started working for Don. they didn't want me leaving the office at 4:00 in the afternoon, 2 days a week to go to Smyrna.
Oh,
I understand,
Yeah.
I'm there to work. I am a member of a 12-step organization. I have done 12-step I started out doing 7 days a week. I still do generally 2 meetings a week. I am a big believer. I do mindfulness. I am a big believer in doing that. I journal. Some of it's the basics. I make sure I get enough sleep. Lack of sleep induces stress. I make sure I eat right. I make sure I exercise. COVID, interestingly enough, has been a boon for me to exercise. I think part of the reason that you see people stressing in COVID is though that, we started working from home. And one of the things I found when I first started working from home is it's hard to keep a boundary between work and life. I mean, I'm sitting in my house right now, right? It's not too hard to walk, I have this thought and it's like, oh, let me go write this down right now. And so I work hard at keeping a work-life boundary. I stay grateful. I do a written gratitude list every day. And I try not to do it by rote. I journal. I have a couple of things that I think about each morning that I try to keep in mind. And I have a little, I use an iPad that I almost use as a message board or a little that sits beneath my computer monitor. And it has some other stuff on it, but one of the things it says to me is every day is an opportunity for a life masterpiece. And the other thing it says to me is how will my actions today shape my character? And I try to keep those things in mind. I got here because I got in trouble with myself. And today I try to do things that keep me out of trouble, not only with you, but keep me out of trouble with myself. If I get up in my head, if I don't stay in the present, and mindfulness is a great thing that helps with that, of staying and being able to stay in the present. I am my own harshest critic sometimes. That negative self-talk.
Yep. 100%.
Is toxic. And so I try to stay out of that. I am also, kind of like we talked about before, I am mindful about conflict management in my professional relationships. Until you tell me that you are not trustworthy with somebody, I will take you at your word. And that's why I say I filed one discovery motion. I never had one filed against me, but I filed one myself. It doesn't mean that I didn't have some back and forth working stuff out, but we were always able to work stuff out, and we were always able to get what we needed because of the relationships that we established. And so I think conflict management is a big part of that, and if you're not constantly in conflict, that relieves a major source of stress in people. And stress is what leads to burnout.
Absolutely. If you're not always, and if you're not always afraid of that phone call, like opposing counsel is calling and I'm afraid to pick up or I'm afraid to engage because we have such a toxic relationship, I mean, that eliminates a massive amount of stress. That's excellent advice.
Yeah, and the last thing, I guess, is I'm a big advocate of giving back, of doing something like this. And I've been on the board of a couple of nonprofits that deal in the recovery area. I do the LAP committee. I try to, I've gotten a lot of gifts in trying to help somebody else just because it's the right thing to do is regenerative for me. So for that, I appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're so happy to have you on. Is there any last bit of advice you have for the audience, whether somebody might be struggling with something similar to what you went through, somebody might be witnessing somebody struggling with it, or if somebody doesn't really identify with this topic, but might need to know a little more about it?
I think if you're a lawyer, I really would recommend, I'm trying to think of, I've got some notes here of what the path to lawyer well-being. I think, and you can get that off the LAP or the ABA website. I think that's an excellent resource. I think if you have somebody who, either you or you have somebody in your life who is actively struggling, I would pick up the phone. And if you don't call an LAP, pick up the phone and ask somebody for help. I mean, help is available. The biggest thing, the worst thing you can do is just try to think that it's going to go away. You know, the consequences of not asking for help are a lot worse. So ask for help. You'll be happy to know that people will not, my experiences, people will not think the less of you. Everybody loves a comeback story, right?
Mm-hmm, that's true. Yes, yes. And if you can be the star of that comeback story to help yourself by helping yourself, or if you can assist somebody be a star in their own comeback story, that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Thank you so much, Allan, for being here with us. And thank you to all of you who joined us for this week's episode of Fridays with Keenan's Cutting Edge Live. If you liked today's episode, please click that thumbs up button to feed the YouTube algorithm. Let YouTube know you find this content interesting and useful. Don't forget to subscribe and sign up for alerts so you don't miss an episode. Next week, we have Papa Don Keenan himself, who's going to join me live for a year in review and looking ahead. We've only been doing this podcast for a year, a little over a year, but this is something I hope to do every year. We had Papa Don last December. We're going to have him again this year. And I hope that this continues because it's such a wonderful opportunity to hear from him about how things are going, not only at the Keenan Law Firm with referring attorneys, but also with KTI, colleges, how they've been going and what is going to be coming up in the next year. This will be a very special episode, so I encourage as many people as possible to show up live, to witness it, to engage with Papa Don if you want to do that. He always has wonderful nuggets of wisdom, and you'll also probably witness him give me a hard time about something in the hour at some point. So that could be fun and entertaining for all of you as well. I am looking forward to it. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you all next time.